Hello everybody and welcome back to the Arkham Reporter channel. And today we're going to be doing a Weird Tales talk video. This is the one where it's unscripted, it's just me talking without a script. But after having done my research about a Weird Tales story. It doesn't have to be Lovecraft, it can be anyone. So if you have a suggestion, you can leave it down in the comments below. And if I have the story, I can read it and do a video like this for you. As per usual, these videos are not scripted and there's no video. It's more like a podcast, so feel free to just click away or just listen to my voice. Oh yeah, by the way, of course, it will make a lot more sense for you if you've read the story and you'll understand the things I'm referencing to. So I'll leave a link to where you can read the story. It's very quick to read, about 10 minutes if even that. You can check it out in the video's description below. Anyway, let's go into Polaris. So, Polaris, what's it all about? Well, first of all, let's do a little bit of backstory to it. It was written in 1918, around May, and it was written from a dream Lovecraft had. So he woke up from a dream and basically wrote this down, and his dream is basically the same as what is presented in the story. So the story is more like a dream cycle type of narration rather than a story like Call of Cthulhu or Shadow of Innsmouth is a story, where there's a direct progress of things happening, it's more clear cut. So in Polaris there's a lot more flowery language, a lot more emphasis on creating a feeling rather than explaining what's happening. That can be a good thing or a bad thing depending how you like your narration, but I quite liked it. It's refreshing, although I do prefer Lovecraft's more standard stories. It's probably because at this time when he wrote it, he was 28. He was still considering himself more of a poet than a writer, He was more focusing on his poetry, and then the writing was sort of like something he did on the side as an experiment or something like that. And then, of course, later on in his career, he focused on long stories, novellas, things like this. Oh yeah, just off at the top of my head right now, this is the first mention of the narcotic, how do you say that word? Pnakotic manuscripts, the Pernotic manuscripts. These were these reoccurring grimoires, or these books which explain the horrors of the life and the history of the universe, like the Necronomicon. And this was like the first mention of that story device. Also, that a lot of scholars have said about this story is that it shows Lovecraft's real world feeling about being weak and useless during World War One. Lovecraft was never really physically the fittest guy. He had some health problems regarding fainting from being overworked or doing some extraneous physical activity. So obviously being a soldier is not going to be possible. But nonetheless, commenters have made this comment. Sorry, it's late at night. And they have said that this is one of the things that is what Lovecraft wanted to express in the story. And once you go through the story, yeah, it's very clear, because basically it's about a narrator who finds his place in a far-off, distant land, and he wants to be a soldier but is unable to fight, and then basically fails the one duty that he was given to do, and then it's basically about his guilt and all that sort of stuff. So probably that is somewhat true. Also, I should point out some other things critics have said. I think even Joshi said this, yeah. It's not a dream cycle story. Now, the dream cycle stories, if you're not familiar with them, is, well, basically in the mythos, you can divide the mythos in two. You got the normal stories, and then you got the dream cycle stories. And the dream cycle stories are different in tone. They're not really horror. There's some horror aspects in them, I guess you could say. But they're more, I don't want to say lighthearted either. They're more stress fantasy, all right? And they always sort of take place in these mythical, far-off fantasy sounding places. Like the name of where this is taking place is, let me find it in my notes here. Lomar is the name of the land, so Lomar. and then the city is called let me see, Olathoe or something like that. So it's not like how Lovecraft also invented Innsmouth, but it's basically a facsimile copy of basically any Rhode Island fishing village or town or something like that. So that's why it's counted typically as a dream cycle story. But critics also like Joshi have said that no, it's not a dream cycle story, because it is argued by him that this story is actually an out of body experience. So the narrator is going back in time 26,000 years ago to inhabit the body of an ancestor, and he's living life through that ancestor from that time ago. And the explanation that is given for this is that in the story Polaris, it actually has one poem that is given there, and it says, "Slumber watcher till the spheres 26,000 years have revolved and I return." So basically it's saying 26,000 years have gone by and then he returns, the narrator. So it's not technically a dream if you want to be super technical about it, but typically it is included in the dream cycle stories, and I personally will still do that because, look, it's focusing on dreaming. And this is the big thing with Lovecraft and dreams. Lovecraft really seems to have believed that dreams and the waking world, which we inhabit now, are basically equal in merit. Dreams are very, very important to him. There's a famous quote he made about dreams. God, it's really late at night. I cannot think of the quote exactly right now. But he really believed that dreams were so important to and their significance, right? And that's one of the themes of this story, is that at the end of the story, okay, at the beginning, the protagonist clearly states, okay, yes, I was having these dreams about this land of Lomar and the city called Olathoe, and he's in the swamp in real life, right? But at the end, he doesn't know if the swamp is real life, or the city is real life. So he's conflicted, and this confliction is creating a sort of existential horror to him. So although this is a dream cycle story, is more fantasy based, there is a horror aspect, and is of course existential horror in its nature. So despite at the end of the story, probably one of the things Lovecraft wanted to say was, are dreams as real as the waking world? I think so. Well, me, Damien, this is what I think. I question the narrator a little bit. All right. I think that the swamp in the story at the beginning is real. I think that's the real one, and this Olathoe was a dream city. Okay, and that this was sort of some wish fulfillment, because the narrator is in the swamp at the beginning, and he describes the swamp very hideously. It's really a disgusting place. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't feel like he belongs there. And then he has this pole star, Polaris, that's the name of the story, looking over him. And then he seems to give Polaris some sort of human characteristics. He calls it uncanny at times, and later on in the story he calls it evil and monstrous. He describes it as leering, winking, and watching. So it's kind of like this narrator is in the swamp, and he feels like, this is not where I belong. I need to get out of here. I cannot sleep. And then the star is like driving him insane or somewhat, and then he sort of invents the city as a wish fulfillment. So that's what I think it's more like. I think that is more likely. That's just my interpretation. And, this is Lovecraft's story. So in the end, he is correct in his He made the story. He has the right to say what is correct and what is not. That's just my personal interpretation of it. The main thing I got from the story is the feeling of weakness. The narrator is not physically fit for the... So in the story, when he enters the dream world, the city is besieged, or potentially going to be besieged by a foreign enemy, and he wants to fight in the army. Remember how I mentioned earlier, this was about World War One. So in the story, the narrator, he wants to fight in the army, but he's unable to. He's too physically weak. He actually says the line in the story here, I was feeble and given to strange faintings when subject when subjected to stress and hardships. And this apparently happened in Lovecraft's real life, in his real life. This is why he wasn't very good at school, not academically, but he had a lot of absences and that sort of stuff, and yeah. So, I mean, as I'm going back to the theme of weakness, the character, he really feels weak. He feels like he's unable to do anything to help. But eventually, he does find a role that he isn't reliant on his physical abilities, really. And then he fails that. He fails the one thing he was given to do. And so it highlights this feeling of weakness. I've had these dreams before, in my personal dreams, where I felt weak or unable to do a common task. Like I know I can do it in reality, and then I had to do something in the dream, something I could easily do, and I had to do that thing in the dream to do something in order to like escape a situation or something like this. My dreams are a little bit fantasy based sometimes as well. And then you're unable to do it, but in real life you can do it. So you get that feeling of weakness and panic. Like, why can't I open this jar? Why can't I pick up this this paper here on the floor? Why can't I do it? And you feel this weakness. And I think this is also something that Lovecraft might have been feeling in the story, And then at the end of the story, he to highlight this thing I'm pointing out about weakness, he says he was begging the dream creatures around him to wake him so that he could fulfill his duty, but they were just laughing at him and mocking him and saying, "No, the swamp is real. This is fake. It's not real. The city is not real." So you see, even at the end of the story, this is a mix-up. What is real? What isn't? And then the narrator says, "I have failed in my duty and betrayed the marble city of Olethoe," from this feeling of weakness that he had. It's actually kind of sad, and it made me feel really bad for Lovecraft, He really must have had some insecurities in this sort of way. I can also relate to the idea of a beautiful land to which you feel connected to, but maybe you have never been to. So the character in the story, even if you take Lovecraft's interpretation that dreams are as real as the real world, you haven't physically been there, really, okay? But it's like this ideal thing in his head, the narrator's head, and he wants to be a part of this beautiful land. At one point there, he actually says in the thing there that he eventually found. He said that gradually I come to wonder what might be my place in that city on a strange plateau, and then eventually he says I had at last a bodily form. So finally he finds this place where he is actually integrated into the city. He's a member of the city, So I understand this feeling of being in a quote-unquote swamp and then finding a place that you really want to be a part of, and you hate waking up in that swamp. So in my personal life, I can also really relate to that. So also in the story, because this is about World War One, but in the story it's also a fictional war, and these people that in the city of Olethoe, which Lovecraft, the narrator, finds comfort in, are basically English. It's implied to be like the English civilization, Anglo-Saxons. And they are being besieged by, wait for it, Eskimos, the Inuit people. So although the fictitious city is sort of based on Anglo-Saxon civilization, the story itself is set in the North Pole. And then the enemy are Eskimos for some reason. But in the story they are called Inutos. So Inutos. And he describes them as squat, hellish, yellow fiends. Oh my god, the social justice warriors are going to have a field day with that description, aren't they? So I also get this sympathy that Lovecraft must have had when you imagine this beautiful land and it's pristine and beautiful and you feel a great love for it, but then it's threatened by an external foreign force, so to me this appeals to the nationalist in me, and I guess Lovecraft was also a bit of a nationalist himself, although I've never actually heard him describe himself as a nationalist. So yeah, I guess, the story is set in the North Pole because of Polaris, and then I guess he had to think of, okay, who would be the enemy of, if there's a city in the North Pole and it's based off of England or Anglo-Saxon culture, who would be the natural enemy? Well, I mean, I guess there's Eskimos there. Okay, let's go for them. So I guess maybe that's why he chose to use them as the enemy force that threatened his city. The worst part of the story, and I'm not saying worse as in the quality, it's a very good story, but the ending part is hell. It really is. Put yourself in this narrator's shoes, right? So basically, the narrator finds a place that he finally finds comfort in. According to the story, the one line that goes there, that he found physical form there. So he feels like, yes, I'm a part of it. And even despite his physical weakness, being prone to fainting and that sort of stuff, even despite this, he can find a role to play in that society. And he feels comfort. But then he falls asleep. And because he was a lookout. So basically in the story he was a lookout and he was to give warning when the enemy were coming. But he fell asleep and then he failed. And so he wakes up in the swamp again. And then he doesn't even realize that the swamp is the reality. Or rather he thinks that maybe the swamp is the dream. And he's trying to wake up from the dream, quote unquote the dream, and go back to reality, which is Olathoe, the city. And he cannot. He's stuck in that swamp. And just like at the beginning of the story, the last mention is the pole star, Polaris. So at the beginning of the story, the first thing that is mentioned is Polaris. At the end of the story, it's still Polaris. But at the end of the story, Polaris, the pole star, is now described by the narrator as evil and monstrous. So there he is in the swamp again, this place he loathes. And there is that thing that was driving him insane. So I really wonder what the hell is the narrator's next solution. To force himself to sleep, induce insomnia or something. Because at the beginning of the story, it also says that he struggles to sleep. Only when it's cloudy and the pole star Polaris is covered with cloud, then he can sleep. And if he can sleep, he can go back to the dream world, which is what he wants. But he cannot, because Polaris is there stopping him, evilly and monstrously. It's really a good story. It's a very short story. Obviously, it's just based off of a dream that Lovecraft had. Not a very long, complex dream, but one of these dreams where not a lot happens, but you wake up with a great sense of emotion. And I think that's what Lovecraft was thinking and feeling. So anyway, all my information that I got, that I'm quoting in this video, I'm getting it from St. Joshi, basically. I Am Providence. He does quite a few pages about Polaris where it's mentioned, so I just had to go through that. Also, there were I went to Wikipedia. I don't use Wikipedia as a source really, but they have citations to where they found information from other critics. And also, it's just my own personal interpretation. This is all very subjective. It's just my opinion, guys, so let me know in the comment section what you think about Polaris. And to the person who actually asked me to do this video, I think you asked me like 6 months ago. I know I'm the worst YouTuber on earth, but I eventually did it. I stuck with my promise, and I'm sticking with my promise to also upload a lot more regularly than I have done before. Someone asked me to do an Algernon Blackwood Weird Tales talk video. Yeah, no problem. That will get done, and I promise it will also be done in less than 6 months. I promise it'll be done soon, but yeah. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. This is just my unscripted analysis of Polaris. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Cheers.